Matt Finch, and today I'm doing something that's a little bit different than I normally do, which is talk about an ongoing Kickstarter. And so hopefully we didn't cut all of that off, so I'm going to actually start it again. Here we go. Hold on. Hi, this is Uncle Matt's D&D Studio. I'm Matt Finch, and today I have with me Glenn Seal, and I'm going to be doing something I don't normally do, which is to talk about an ongoing Kickstarter. And the reason one doesn't usually do that is that if someone comes and looks at the video 5 years later, it's not au courant with the times. So it's a rare thing, but I want to talk about this Kickstarter. Glenn, what I'm thinking of doing here is I want to make something where you can link to it and have people who are still on the fence about the Kickstarter come and look at, sort of an interactive talking about it more than the thing of, showing people here are the monsters, here's what I've done in the past. And so just sort of to do that, because once again, and before we start talking with Glenn, two things. Number one, please subscribe to this channel, even if you're watching in 5 years from now. And then the other thing I've completely forgotten. What was I saying? Damn, there's something.
I do that. Don't worry.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll. That's my one, and then you can have a complete brain loss at some point later on in the video, and we won't count it against you. Okay. So what I wanted to talk about, I think this is what I was going to say. I'm going to actually probably defocus because I'm changing my screen over to take a look. Now, right now, the Midderlands expanded Kickstarter is the one that we're looking at. And if you go to Kickstarter, and I will put a link up, but if anyone is looking for it and searching by Kickstarter, it's Midderlands, Midderlands expanded, and right at the moment when Glenn and I are talking, it has a goal of $19,640. It is at $12,495, which means that it is not funded. It's currently in the what I usually call the doldrums period, where nothing's happening, and then you're about to run toward the last 3 days of the Kickstarter where things pick up. So let's start. For anyone who's not familiar with it, just give us an idea of what's going on in this Kickstarter and what you've done in the past in this same setting.
Okay, well, this Kickstarter basically expands the setting that currently exists, which is for an area of kind of my fictitious England, which is called Havenland. The original Kickstarter covered a campaign setting area of about 45 miles across. But what I wanted to do with this one is to take that further out to the coasts, include a bit of the sea and the neighbouring countries as well. So we've got north, we've got Scotland, we've got Oldham Vale, which is kind of my version of Wales, Emerald, which is Ireland, the Serpent Lands, and also Gorlandia, which is France. So I've got a map that I can always pop up onto screen if you want to see that. Shall I try and do that now?
Yeah, go ahead and put the map up while we're talking, and then one of the things that I liked about the first Kickstarter that you did. And have delivered, and there haven't been any problems with it, and it's a phenomenal quality product in terms of not only the content but also the book. So to let anyone know, that's often a question that people have about Kickstarters is, has the person funded the Kickstarter before? Have they completed the deliveries, and so on and so forth? And the answer to that is yes, and it's good stuff for a small area. So I have your map up here now, Glenn.
Okay, so basically you can see that the outline is pretty much essentially what people are going to be familiar with. The names, I'm always putting my kind of twist on them. So we've got, Cornwall is Cernwall, Devon is Devon, So they're close, but they're sort of giving this extra twist. We've got shipwrecks and things like that off the coast, and over in the kind of northeast, we've got the Serpentlands, which is it's essentially my sort of twisted take on a kind of Scandinavian Viking sort of feel, but it's serpent men, and they've got goals to come over to Havenland and try and invade. So there's a bit of a theme of that in this second Kickstarter.
Okay, now let's pull back to your face from the map, and I want to ask whether we've got so we've got this area, and I guess part of my question about the Kickstarter is what is the expansion? Is it purely a geographical expansion of more things and more cultures than the Midderlands, or have you got and in the Midderlands, it was mainly resources that you had there for just, here is this area. Have you added in anything in the nature of adventure hooks, quest hooks, or is this okay? All right, so talk about that, because that's something a bit different from the way that you approached the Midderlands as a whole, the original.
Yeah, well, in the first book, there was kind of an adventure and a few little hooks, but because the area was less contained, was more contained, that they were, reasonably specific to that area. Whereas with this, we've got, there's a bestiary section, but it's not like the first one. So each monster, doesn't have a race class and an NPC necessarily. So we've got the bestiary, we've got NPCs and various notable folk. We've got spells, we've got items which come under the oddities. So we've got more flora and fauna. But because we've got more area to explore, we've also got the locations that are noted. So there's some similarities to the layout of the first book, but we're encompassing a larger area, and we're also including more things. That there's an adventure in there which centres on an inn actually in the Midlands. But you could put that anywhere, you don't have to run these things exactly to the book. And also another location in the Midlands, there's a marketplace underneath the kind of rock that the castle sits on, which is in Brignorth, which is in the first book. So that's detailed and gives people an opportunity to do a bit of exploring in there as well.
Now, one question that a lot of people may have, and I noticed this when I went to the Kickstarter page, and it was that it appears like it's highly focused on swords and wizardry, which I think it is not. In terms of the rule system that you can use with this, it's virtually anything. Looking at the middle, it might need a little bit of tweaking for 5th edition, but I think if anyone's looking at that and saying, oh, swords and wizardry is not my rule system, that's just not a concern. I think most people, certainly people that are into the old school gaming, they can just pick it up and run. The swords and wizardry sort of stat block, if you like, is pretty much portable, into what you want. A little bit of extra work, and 5th edition is easy enough to kind of pull into it. So originally it was, I mean, if you take the setting aside, the setting itself is it doesn't contain any statistical information at all whatsoever. So the setting is effectively standalone and will work in any game system, with a kind of late medieval vibe. That's a good point. That's a good point. That even when we say there's only a little tweaking required for 5th edition and no real tweaking required, if you're playing 1st edition D&D or whatever it might be, the fact of the matter is that, at least in the last one, and I assume, and I'm hearing you say it about this one as well, is that the vast majority of the book is effectively system neutral entirely.
Yeah.
So you could pick it up and you could run it with RuneQuest, and
Yeah.
so that that is an important point to make, I think. And let me go through the various things that may have people sitting on a fence about a Kickstarter, and ask you those questions. And again, this may seem like an interrogation, but but to anybody who's listening to this should know that I'm very much I'm a backer on this Kickstarter. I totally support Glenn's stuff. I love the last product that he came up with. Now what I'm doing is that, since there probably are a lot of people out there, people run through a set of questions with Kickstarters, and you are in a real disadvantage in that there is another huge Kickstarter running right now, which is called Strongholds and Streaming. And whenever something that's $1 million RPG Kickstarter comes out, like Dwarven Forge or Reaper, it sucks the wind out of the Kickstarter market. And so even people who aren't buying it, what happens is they go and they look at it and then they leave Kickstarter. So,
I mean, if just 100 of those backers came along to Matt Colville would never miss it.
Right. No,
and
exactly.
I'd be very grateful about it.
So in and frankly, I think you're going to fund, because what happens with Kickstarters is that you start very strong, you have a completely dead period in the middle, and then you have a run up. I think the risk here is that run up may be affected by Strongholds and Streaming. So hopefully, so what we're gonna do here is we're gonna run through the various questions people may have on Kickstarters, let you answer them, and then hopefully that'll offset a little bit the effect of having a 500-pound gorilla out there at the same time as your Kickstarter. So
as a backer of many Kickstarters as well, I feel the pain of a lot of people that are uncertain about whether to jump onto a Kickstarter or not. I think having your first Kickstarter under the belt is a massive bonus, and getting that out and delivered, and having something that people are enjoying is that's probably half of the battle. But you're never going to stop the big Kickstarters being contenders for pledges.
Yeah, and I mean, sometimes they help, sometimes they don't. But just as a general rule, there's only a certain amount of money that people are spending, on certain things at any given time, and they do sort of take away from that. So you have answered the first question that everyone asks, which is, have you done one before? Have you delivered? And you have. You delivered a very strong product. I haven't seen anybody coming out with negative comments about it. So that's one thing for people who are watching this to know, is that the reaction to your first Kickstarter has been very good. You've got one under the belt, you've done it, you know how to do the deliveries. All of that is basically answered. And then the second question I touched upon, which was that what I really liked about the first Midderlands piece was that it was self-contained, and this one specifically is not self-contained. So there's the issue of let's talk about the nature of those two types of products. Self-contained one, very easy to drop into a campaign, sort of a no-brainer to buy, because you'll be able to mine it for ideas. Get something up to the level of an actual campaign the size of England, which, granted, in RPG terms is not a very large area a lot of the time, because of the way people do hex things. But so explain to me, what's the benefit of expanding the Midderlands at all?
Good question. What is the benefit? If you've enjoyed the first Kickstarter, then this is more of the same kind of content, and it also expands that. You could actually take the Midlands Expanded standalone and use a lot of the content in it. It's laced with what I call game juice and adventure hooks. So you can pretty much flip to a page and read a page worth of stuff, and hopefully come up with a number of different adventures or seeds for adventure that you could slip into anything. So I think that it stands alone in terms of giving a GM lots of things to think about.
But what you've just described is something that's probably true. That what you've just said is basically an excuse for an expansion, which is, oh, it'll be okay anyway because you can use the bits.
Yeah.
What's the benefit to having an expansion of a small campaign area? I know I'm not giving you I'm not giving you softball questions, but the reason is that way people who really are asking hard questions can come and take a look at the video and say, oh, okay, that works.
Yeah, okay.
I have some answers. If you don't have answers, I have some answers.
Well, no, what I felt a little bit constrained with the Midderlands setting because of the area that it covered. It also didn't have any coasts, so there's a whole extra area of things to unwrap and uncover when you add coastlines and other countries into the mix, which the first setting didn't have. So that's provided quite a lot of extra source for inspiration for me.
So and those I think are some important points there that you made. That number one, as awesome as the Midderlands piece is, it doesn't have those coastlines and seafaring. The option to do some seafaring adventure is something that crosses the minds of pretty much any adventuring party ever. I mean, one person has to watch Pirates of the Caribbean 1 week, and then you've got the pirate campaign suddenly surfaces again.
Yeah. And also being able to do that and have other countries on the borders creates an opportunity for things like invasion and external threat, which you sort of have a bit of that in the Midlands, but it's coming from below, whereas this is now making it come from kind of all sides. So yeah, you've got more opportunity for threats that are not just the below ground ones that are kind of suggested in the first campaign setting.
So you've sort of folded in a second layer of types of expeditions and adventures that people have access to, meaning not just coastal in terms of terrain, but also the types of adventure hooks that are driven by politics. And it is very true. That is I won't call it a weak point of the Midderlands, the small set. I mean, the benefit that I liked about it was that it's easily dropped in anywhere, but obviously anything that's that small, you're leaving out certain types of adventures. And so this in a way is not so much a geographical expansion, it's an expansion of the types of things that can be done with the resource.
Yeah, and I think this kind of just expands it out enough to allow that, whereas in terms of a book 3 later down the line, I wouldn't take on the world. I wouldn't create the world of the Midlands setting because this covers most of those bases really for me. You could expand it out and have kind of a Middle Eastern kind of origin and stuff, but you just reskinning things like the Serpent Lands, really. So there would be no point I feel in me doing that. This wants to stay as a kind of late medieval Englandy, British Isles themed setting, because that's what I'm familiar with. And the original setting was written about a location, around where I live, whereas this has got a little bit further out. So there's places that I'm writing about that I don't necessarily know, but I have traveled quite a bit of the British Isles, so there are some places that appear on the map that I'm very familiar with. So that writing about familiar locations is still there, such that people that live anywhere near it will be able to pick out those details.
That's one of the things that I really liked too about the Midderlands, and I'm glad that it's going to continue forward in this one. That it's one of the things that's really unique and cool about your stuff is that you can see the fact of being familiar with the locations is not something that I've ever seen somebody really use in the idea of, hey, here's a place that I go to every week to, to buy milk, and I'm going to take it and put it into, a fantasy setting.
Yeah.
And that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, there's a location on the coast of Wales in real life, which is called Barmouth, and anybody that lives in the middle of England might know it as Birmingham by the Sea, because a lot of people from the middle of England, if they want to get to the coast, it's one of the locations to get to. It's about 2.5 hours away. And I've been there a lot, ever since I was a kid, and I know it well. So what I've done is I've given Oldham Wales to Mark Nolan to write about, because he's quite familiar and he goes on a lot of holidays there. But I said to him, leave Bearmore, as I've now called it, because I want to write about that. There's a bit of passion there to plugging all of the things that I'm familiar with from going there a lot. One of the things is there's actually a carved wooden Easter Island head, and it actually exists in real life. It's on the sand dunes over there. So that's going to be part of the text, and I've drawn the map for it already, and the map is very closely mimicking the actual real life location as well.
And I think that's one of the things I really enjoyed about the Midderlands, and I think people will enjoy the bits and pieces where you've traveled, showing up in the expanded ones. Now another thing that people often have concerns about with Kickstarter is Kickstarters that overpromise, and particularly in stretch goals. And that's probably not an issue here, because you haven't done the tactic of putting a funding goal that's lower than what you actually need, and then trying to get instant funding, and then getting people to chase stretch goals. That's not what you've done here. You've got clearly an actual funding goal, so doesn't look like there's going to be risk on stretch goals. Have you overpromised anything, do you think, in the product itself?
Not at all. There's no way that I would engage in this if I hadn't considered as many of the costs as I possibly can, and also the risks. I was a project manager for quite a while, and I kind of understand that you've got to do mitigation to kind of not bite you on the arse. The book itself is pretty much exactly the same book in terms of size and quality as before. The poster map is two-sided, again, same kind of quality as before. So I'm creating two products that are exactly the same as I've already created.
And I think most people, when they look at it, will realize that really the important thing is here that you've done a product of exactly this scope and gotten it delivered. So I don't think there are a lot of people who have that concern, but a lot of people will take a look at a Kickstarter, and that is one of their big concerns. So just to allay that worry, this is not the sort of second Kickstarter where somebody suddenly decides that they can do all kinds of things they can please everybody and provide every resource, and the result is that they never end up funding that. There's pretty much zero risk of that with this one. So
I think people give themselves a lot of project management nightmares, and they're unable to juggle all of these different elements, that all have their own different sets of risks. The only thing different really in this Kickstarter is the GM screen, which the GM screen is just 4 panels and printed. It will be done by the same printer that's doing the map. So the same supplier that is already proven is doing them. We've discussed it at length, and there's no issues with that.
Right. So now I'm done with the section where we're talking about risks on Kickstarters and stuff like that, because I don't want anybody to get, to think just because we're talking about risks that they are, big on this one, because I think the point of this is that you've addressed all of the risks. And I don't want to dwell on that, because I really would like people to go to the Kickstarter, take a look, understand what's being done there, and see that it's a really, really good product that's being put together. It's one that I think is going to be an awful lot of fun, having seen the first one.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. I mean, in terms of where the Kickstarter's at the moment, I mean, I think you guys see the dollar value rather than the British pound value that I see. But I mean, in terms of the first Kickstarter had a £12,000 funding goal, and it reached £14,000, which is the funding goal of this Kickstarter. So in terms of the two Kickstarters, actually the amount of money that they need to get is the same. In terms of measuring the current progress of this Kickstarter versus the first one, this one's actually slightly ahead. So providing it has the same rally as the first Kickstarter, then yeah, it should fund. But I don't think there's any room for complacency. Like you say, there's other Kickstarters that are fighting for pledges and things like that. But yeah, it's one of those things you don't know until the timer sets to 0, and you are where you are with it. But
every Kickstarter, I think, has that run up at the end. It's very clear. It doesn't matter whether it's a tiny Kickstarter or a large one. That's just the way it works. Is that you have the big start, and then you have a big end. And what happens, I think, in the middle is that you get some people who put in a $1 pledge, and what they're waiting to do is to possibly buy it at the end. You get a lot of people who are simply saying, I don't know, I'll get to that. And then all of a sudden they get the whole 24-hour notice, and they're like, oh gosh, okay, it's time to actually, get off my ass and do this and put it in. Every Kickstarter has that. And I think the issue here, what I want to do is make sure that you get your fair shake at it, given the fact that there's a monster Kickstarter out there at the same time. So
yeah, no, I really appreciate that.
Yeah, my pleasure. I really, really enjoyed the last one. So anything else that you want to say at this point? Most people either will or will not have made some sort of decision by this point in the video. So what? There's another couple of things probably. In terms of collecting, shipping, that will be handled in BackerKit. There'll also be an opportunity to obtain leather covers as well in BackerKit, like the one that was sort of bespoke in the first one. They've not been added as pledges because it would have just pushed the funding goal a bit too far that I was comfortable with. But there'll also be an option for another different leather cover, which will be based on the threat from the northeast, which is the Serpent Kings. I've also had some snake skin leather cover samples, which Randy at Abbott's Hollow sent me. So I'm not sure yet whether that Serpent King leather cover will be snake skin or not. But yeah, I kind of like the idea of that already. But yeah, at the moment on the Kickstarter, it's mentioned, and there's a bit of a mock-up with three eyes in a triangular pattern. But yeah, it was an actual snake. It's actual snake skin.
No, I don't think I'd get that through customs. No, it's actually, I believe it's lamb's. Yeah, it's actually lamb's skin, with an embossed snake style pattern on it. So yeah, those.
It's simultaneously both vellum and snake skin.
Yes, you can't ask for any more, can you?
No, you really can't.
So yeah, those will be BackerKit add-ons effectively.
And the snake skin was not a promise. You're still evaluating that one. So
yeah, in the Kickstarter it talks about it, and there's a bit of a mock-up which is shown in a kind of dark grey leather like similar to the first muculus leather cover, like that one, but a darker grey. And the three eyes would be they're a kind of cerulean colour in a triangle.
And for those of us who are not graphic designers, is cerulean blue,
it's
yellow?
Blue, yeah, it's blue, tinging towards green in this particular instance, and that's where something else that I've not really mentioned, that I kind of wanted the external threats to not necessarily be this green color. I wanted it to be a slightly different color, just to kind of add that element of difference and just change things up a little bit. So yeah, the Serpent King Menace is slightly different colored, and if you go and visit over in the Serpent Lands, then you'll see that the skies are subtly different color. That's
cool. All right. Anything else you want to add?
I don't think so, other than that's my GM screen mock-up, which is it's kind of the same size as the book. So when it folds up, it'll all go together nicely on a shelf.
Nice.
And yeah, that's pretty much about it. So yeah, we just need to wait out the next 7-8 days, and hope this gets past the line, and we can start making it into a reality.
All right. Well, hopefully people will take a look at the video. I'll probably put it up tomorrow, which is Sunday the 18th, and then people have a relatively short window. I think that puts them about 1 week left on the Kickstarter. And then if you have anybody who's asking for general, what's a third-party person talking about the Kickstarter sound like, you can direct them over to here, and I will say that if you have listened to the video so far, you're probably getting it, and that's excellent. So good.
Yeah. Please help.
Very good. We'll go ahead and end the show there, and we'll say no matter what sort of Dungeons and Dragons it is that you play, and imagine the hell out of it.